Okay, good morning, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our conversation this afternoon. I hope everyone is healthy and safe and sound in their homes and doing the best they can during these challenging times. I'm Peggy Clark of the Aspen Institute, and I'm delighted to be with you all for our first Aspen Health for All Activate talk. And we join you today as we're all trying to do the best we can to keep our loved ones and our coworkers and our communities safe and sound. But I know that many of us are also asking what more we can do to help. So a group of us at the Aspen Institute, many of whom are on this call today, put our heads together and we came up with the idea of Aspen Health for All Activate, which is a series of conversations where we're highlighting some of our Aspen fellows, speakers from Aspen Ideas Festival, and other experts to tell us about what they're doing during this moment of the coronavirus pandemic and ways that we can join in and help them. So please bear with us as we master the Zoom technology today. This is our very first one, but the plan for today is we will have a conversation with our speakers, and then we'll open up to all of you for questions and answers. We have plenty of time for you to get all of your talks, all of your questions in. I hope that my host can bring up the images of our speakers today. Okay, here they come. Great, beautiful. Okay, so the question here is, what if we put two entrepreneurs and an emergency room doctor together on a talk about N95 masks? And that is what we're about to do. So today we're focusing on the severe shortage of N95 masks. These are the certified respiratory masks that all health workers need at a minimum to deal with COVID patients. And I think many of us have been able to see this beautiful chorus of clapping of health workers in many cities across the country, in Chicago last night, in New York. And I think all of us feel that those at the front lines are the ones that are putting both themselves and their families most at risk. So we want them to be prepared. We want them to help with this crisis. Yet, many of you know there is still an acute and very urgent and severe crisis and shortage of N95 masks in every hospital and clinic across the country. The Health and Human Services estimates just yesterday that we will need 3.5 billion masks to get through this pandemic together. Yet in many hospitals today, one doctor may have a mask for the whole week. So today we're going to hear from our speakers to kind of look behind the scenes on the complexities of the supply and demand for masks and what is happening at this challenging moment in that market. We will also be hearing about the heroic things that our speakers are doing to address this challenge right now and how they've stepped into the fray for us all. So it's my pleasure to introduce our speakers. First, we have the wonderful Esther Chu. Esther is there waving her hand. I hope you all can see her. Esther is a wonderful friend to the Aspen Institute. She's an emergency room physician. She's the associate professor at Oregon Health and Science University. She's a wonderful practicing physician and an activist and advocate for health worker equity. She's become a regular speaker on CNN and MSNBC on this question of masks, and recently launched a campaign called Get Us PPEs, Personal Protective Equipment. Welcome, Esther. We're so delighted you're with us. Are you off mute now, Esther? There we go.
I'm now off mute. Thank you,
Great.
Peggy.
And Esther has really just joined us after an all-night shift at the hospital. So Esther, we're really delighted you could be with us today. The next speaker with us is Ami Dror. Ami is there with the beautiful smile. He is joining us from Israel, where his two children are doing their online lessons. So his bandwidth isn't perfect, but Ami's there with us. Ami, can you say hello?
Hi, everybody. Very nice to be here with you.
Great. Ami is the co-founder of Leap Learner, which is a Shanghai-based education technology company that enables children to code. He's a kind of serial entrepreneur. He's an Aspen Henry Crown Fellow. He's founded a number of companies. One was the Zaytun Ventures, which has invested in a number of technology startups. One is the first 3D TV technology, which is now owned by Sony, Samsung, Expand, and Panasonic. But he has jumped into the fray in this question of masks right now, and we're delighted to have you with us, Ami. Thank you so much. And then we also have Maven. Are you there? Can you say hello?
Hi.
Salim is also an Aspen Henry Crown Fellow. She's the founder of Adicia. Some of you may have heard of Plumpy Nut, which is a remarkable nutritious substance that is used in relief situations. Naveen founded this company, which is based in Rhode Island, which produces a number of fortified peanut butter products like Plumpy Nut, as well as other products for children. There, she's showing us the image right now. She has been supplying UNICEF, World Food Program, USAID, and other NGOs working in emergency situations. She has reached over 11 million children in over 50 countries, including Somalia, Venezuela, Yemen, and Syria. And she's just launched a new line of nut butters. And interesting, you all may be wondering why all of these entrepreneurs are involved in the mask discussion, but you will soon find out. So let's just jump in and start with you, Esther. Tell us about the scope of the problem. What are you seeing and what is the need?
Yeah, I'm guessing a lot of you before this week, or before the events of the past several weeks and before this pandemic didn't spend a lot of time thinking about PPE or this personal protective equipment. And I will tell you that even being in the healthcare setting, it's not something you ever thought about. I mean, we always have these things like gowns, gloves, masks, face shields in plentiful supply. You don't think of them any more than you think about just daily objects around your house, your plates, your forks, your toothbrushes and toothpaste. They're just these everyday objects. They are a path to what you need to do, but you don't spend a lot of time like really valuing, you know, your fork or something. And that's really what PPE was like in the hospital for us. We used it every day, almost carelessly. I mean, I would use a mask and accidentally take two, drop one on the floor and just kind of toss them both aside. And now we think of that waste and it's simply agonizing because in this pandemic with this disease that's so easily transmissible, we of course need a full set of PPE, particularly in the emergency room when we're taking care of very sick patients. And we need to be in full PPE. So that's those special N95, the respirator masks that filter out the fine particles that that can have virus on them, that can be aerosolized into the air. We need eye protection and whole face protection. And actually, if you've seen videos of people in some of the other countries, really head to toe PPE to prevent them from getting some small accidental exposures. They're up and close with really sick patients. So it became pretty obvious as the disease arrived here in other countries as well that PPE was running out fast. Because it's a global disease, it came all at once. The entire world started needing PPE in higher concentrations than ever before. And you could just tell in any healthcare worker chat groups, I would say by the end of February, we were all starting to swap stories about how we were needing to stretch out the PPE we had, doing conservation things that I'd never even considered or heard of, like wearing these masks, which are all meant to be single-use items. We were all starting to share how we were being asked to wear them for multiple patients or even for multiple shifts in a row, just putting them into a bag in between, just completely unheard of measures to recycle these things. People were using masks until the straps broke off and then were stapling them back on rather than getting a new mask. And these items were being locked up and being distributed very carefully. And so by early March, it was something that I didn't know of a place where they weren't undergoing some sort of conservation measures. And then as the as the number of COVID-19 cases started to rise in this country, and we were seeing huge volumes in these hotspots in Seattle and New York, and now New Orleans, the issue really came to a head, and was clearly a crisis, because healthcare workers no longer felt safe at all going into these rooms, and we started to watch healthcare workers fall ill themselves. And now many have died, and it became obvious that without PPE, we cannot continue to take care of everyone who needs it in hospitals. So, and I would say this kind of burst into public awareness in mid-March.
Mm-hmm. And so, Esther, two things. One, you've just gotten off your shift, and I think you've said it's not. It's a little bit better in Portland, which is where you are, I think. What did you see just in the last few hours?
Yeah, I just have to be very careful because I'm not an official spokesperson for my hospital. So I think I can speak to the parts of my experience that I know are very common across hospitals, certainly in Oregon, but also across the country. We are a state that first of all, we weren't one of the very early states, but also we have really been a flatten the curve success. So I think being just a few hours down from, just one state down from Washington, we took those lessons very seriously, and our target peak date has really been spread out. That being said, in the hospitals, every single shift I work, there are more patients with acute viral respiratory illnesses. They're getting sicker and needing more care, and our numbers are creeping up. So really, hospitals these days are turning into large COVID wards, because other patients are very much avoiding the hospital. We're seeing a lot less misadventure from things like injuries, because people simply aren't out going to, say, parties and driving around. There's just much less recreation, so we don't see many of the usual things we see in the ER. And really, it's people concerned about COVID or very ill with it that we're starting to see.
Okay, that's great, Esther. And I know you started this wonderful campaign, Get Us PPE, which we're going to turn to in a minute. And a part of this conversation is to help people understand how they can help doctors and health workers like you. But let's turn to you, Ami. So Ami, you are an unlikely speaker on this subject. You run an education technology company. Tell us the story of how you got involved in making masks and what led to what you and Naven have been involved in bringing almost 500,000 masks to Rhode Island and other key spots.
So my company is headquartered in China, in Shanghai, and for us, PPE is something that we always have with us. This is what we wear where there's pollution. And it was not in China, but I definitely lived through Corona in China, because I saw what's going on with my team, with their families. So it was very obvious to me that this is coming to Israel and this is coming to the U.S. And more in months ago, I started to reach out to all my friends and say, hey, why won't I buy some masks for you in China and ship it over? Because you guys should be ready. Plus, really, there was very little reaction. Like most of us, like Navin, we all got masks. I got a bunch of masks. And I try to keep pushing people to buy masks. We have a lot of time. We knew a month before what's going to happen in the U.S. So we started in China that have nothing to do with procurement masks. They started to go to different factories and different dealerships and starting to learn everything that there is to know about the subject. And slowly, the demand from different places in the U.S. started to grow, and in Israel. Nathan, because she runs DCA, it was very clear that the DCA needs to keep running. You don't want to have such an important factory being shut down. So the first one was to equip everybody in DCA. And then Nathan said, well, I'm going to check with the hospitals. And then we started to equip hospitals in Rhode Island with masks. And other friends from New Orleans and California started to grow. and slowly from shipping boxes with 600 masks to people that they will donate it to their local hospitals, we ended up with hundreds of thousands. And right now, that's what we're doing. I have a team that in their normal days, they're supposed to teach people how to code, running from dealer to dealer, from factory to factory, in overpriced, getting it into our office. We repackage everything because it goes on air. Like, we need to fly it. It's not going into containers. And we'll ship every possible channel, FedEx, UPS, direct shipment, and try to get those masks as far as we can. Initially it was a tiny, and became too big. I reached out to Nathan because we are classmates and very good friends. I say, hey, can you help me with coordinating a lot of this effort in the U.S. because this is way it's been growing, and we've been to cycles when it's very hard. Like manufacturers don't have stuff. They don't have like on every. Everybody's fighting for those now, and it's not an American issue; it's a global issue. When you're talking about 3 billion masks, that's what the entire world, and then you understand how big is the problem.
So Ami, we're having a little hard time hearing you. I think some can hear you okay, but your dear friend Naven has said that she will translate for you since she's been your partner in working on this. So Naven, can I turn to you for a minute to tell the story from your perspective of how you came to be this logistics hub in Rhode Island, and when you really run a food business, not a mask business. Tell us a little bit about the story of how you got involved in this.
Right. So I've been working in the emergency business for the last 12 years. So operating with urgency and understanding of what's going on in global supply chains is something that we've been living, for many, many years. So, Ami reached out to our class of 20 in our Henry Crown Fellowship and started kind of sounding the alarm a long time ago. And he at first was sounding like the crazy person in the room, but we knew that because he had his company in China, that he had like a time machine and could look into the future and really tell us what was coming. He had to lay off people from his own company, but then realized that if he took his employees and repurposed them to try and go and actually find this. So he has employees who are going door to door to actual factories and verifying that these are, what are needed around the world, that they are FDA approved, et cetera. And so all of us within our group started to like catch on to this. And the problem that we found is then people want to come back and ask 50 questions. And the thing is, like, the world is not working like it did a month ago. And so if you're a state and you're coming and you want certifications and you want, like, all of these rules just are really irrelevant. My state of Rhode Island said to me, I want 2 million masks and we'll pay you in 30 days. And I was like, today's price, that's like $10 million. So you want me to like find $10 million and go buy all these masks and you'll pay me maybe in 30 days. And so, it can't work like that. And so we've been trying to figure out how can we work so that we are not dealing with any delays, like none of this back and forth. So we thought the easiest way is like, Ami, just ship them to my warehouse. I have a logistics team. I have a warehouse. I'm in the Northeast. I can at least handle New York, Connecticut, in this area, and then we can ship directly to our fellows that happen to be in New Orleans, in California, et cetera. And so we've been actually trying to raise money and also use our own funds to front the money so that we can make these purchases while people are kind of getting the plot and understanding how urgent the need really is and how short the supplies really are. So that buys everyone else time so that when they figure it out, we have the stuff sitting here. So I have piles of it in my factory right now. And the goal is to get it out immediately. It should not sit there longer than 24 hours. So as soon as it comes in, we assign it to where we're seeing needs. And so if you all have needs, we cannot see everything, like reach out to us and let us know where you have an urgent need that maybe someone else hasn't noticed.
Good. So Naven, let me ask you about what you've been able to do in Rhode Island. I think you and Ami started kind of small, sort of 20,000 masks, and now I think you told me you're going to have about 500,000 masks in the state of Rhode Island. Is that correct?
Yes, but we're also, we don't want to hoard here. We're very aware of the states, New York and Connecticut that might need earlier. So we're trying to manage our supply chain to be a reasonable amount, but then talking with them and saying, listen, if we need to divert some, let's divert. And they're totally on board with this. Like, they understand that, like, we're doing okay right now, so it's good for us to prepare, but we can't hold on to things. We've got to let them go. And the way that AMI has figured this out makes me feel pretty reassured that the supply chain can keep coming. So the concept is to send every single day a certain amount from many different suppliers so that we're not dependent on one single chain in case it breaks.
Okay, so let's talk about the supply and demand and sort of the economics of the problem, which is hard for all of us to wrap our heads around. And let's also talk about the most recent news with President Trump saying that there are enough supplies. He's enacted the Defense Protection Order. But Ami, I think I learned from you and also Esther that there are very few factories in the US. In fact, I think you said only 2, Ami, that currently produce N95 masks. One of them is 3M. And so we're dependent upon the sources mostly from China, and that the fact of factories trying to reorganize themselves to make masks is not something that happens instantaneously. So Ami, can you try to answer that? And if we're still a little crackly, maybe we can go to your video screen, but tell me a little bit about this manufacturing challenge in the market right now.
So in China, I'll just give you the China mirror, and then it will allow you to understand the US better. When everything started in China, the Chinese government immediately bought the global supply of Honeywell. They went to Honeywell and said, we don't care if you manufacture in Costa Rica, we own it. And in the same time, they repurposed about 200 factories, textile factories, you name it, and they repurposed to make not only N95, but of course other protection gear, because it's a manufacturing country. Now, when you have in the US, you don't have enough manufacturing, and even if you want to build a factory, it takes time. You need to source raw materials. You need to do a lot of things. So for the long term, of course, it's impossible to import everything to the US. It's too expensive. But until you have enough factories in the US, and this is, again, it's a global issue, until you need to import fast. And I think what was special about Rhode Island, by the way, is the speed. We had masks before they even knew that they needed it. And I think this is our goal right now. It's not a game of price. It's a game of speed. Right now, we need to ship. So we don't want to get fake stuff. We want to have the real thing, but we want to do it as fast as possible. And every day, each hour that we are slowing up bureaucracy, it's actually hurting our MDs, or hurting our nurses, and that means that when we will be sick, there will be nobody to take care of us. So this is why speed is so key.
Okay, so Ami, let me see. I wonder if I could ask you to try to go back to the audio on your computer, because it's a little crackly on your phone, and I know you're such incredible as to say. Esther, let me turn to you. This seems to be a crisis kind of a marketplace. It's a catch as catch can. And if you know somebody, if you knew Ami, you could get those masks. Your friends of mine in Virginia are trying to get masks, but the state doesn't trust, they can't buy them. What is happening with this decentralized market? And how can people understand it? And do you think, obviously, that we ideally we would have a federal coordination system, but we don't. So tell me your thoughts about what's happening in the market for masks right now.
Yeah, I mean, I think in mid-March, there was a little bit of a pause, like maybe a week, where we thought the government is going to handle this. Like, we will invoke the Defense Production Act. There's going to be mass mobilization of industry, and it'll be well coordinated. We'll figure out some sort of way to centralize a database so that we know where all the need is based on hospital stockpiles, their ability to tap into supply and their patient loads. And that we would be able to kind of follow disease across the country as the wave moved, and sort of, make sure there was equitable distribution as we also boosted supply. And then we realized that either wasn't going to happen or it wasn't going to happen quickly. And that's where all of this grassroots movement came. I mean, I don't think it all happened in March. There were people who were really on top of this earlier, obviously. Listening to our speakers, this didn't happen overnight, but I think we all just started to really put energy into this grassroots thing. And so there is increasingly more and more consolidation, and we are trying to at least get some sources where we can be a place where there can be exchange of information between those with supply and those with need. So getusppe.org is one of those sites. So I'm a part of this with a bunch of friends. I can't claim responsibility for setting up the interface or doing the behind the scenes work, but I've contributed to promoting it and helping organize some of this effort. But we have, and this is one of several websites, but we have over 3,000 healthcare institutions that have engaged with this website to sort of post their need and instruction about dropping off. And then people with supply can come and log in who they are, how they can be reached, and what items they have in stock or can make readily available. And it's a place where people could then start to look who's, who is near them regionally, which suppliers have the kind of prices that are affordable for them, and then make that connection and try to increase their supply. And then there's also a makers tab so that people interested in making face masks at home for health systems that are accepting those kinds of masks can also find a place. So it's not, it's not the solution to a centralized system nationally, but at least it's starting to provide some common place for people and organizations to go. And I will say there were many efforts that were set up even as like single Google sheets for people to go in and look for supply or look for need. And we subsumed many of those. I think more than 20 smaller groups actually ended up coming in with Get Us PPE, and we continue to try to coordinate with other groups. Masks for Docs is another one that is coordinated with thousands of groups. And then there really are these smaller city-based chapters of Get Us PPE that are doing some of that really fine, last mile coordination to make sure that the drop-offs are connecting.
That's great. And Esther, thanks. You mentioned a couple of these, maskfordocs.org, getusppe.org, also Naven's website, adicia.org. You can go to donate there, and also getusppe.org. There's a number of others. Project N95,
Yes.
those are on the website.
Yes.
I'm really struck by, in talking with each of you, the question of leadership at this moment in the crisis that we're facing, and who jumps in and who doesn't jump in, and how you jump in and how you exert your leadership. And I'm really struck by all three of you as heroes in this, and not waiting for a rule book or a framework. Ami, I see that we have you back on video, which is great. At one time I asked you, what do you think are the greatest barriers to solving the N95 crisis? And you said fear of acting. Can you tell us a little bit about what you meant by that? And I'd also love others' thoughts on that as well.
Well, again, we need to know that we cannot play by the rules. That's the basic fact, and it's for people that obey the rules all the time. It's a little bit hard for us. I'll try to give you an example. That's probably the easiest way to understand. On the early days, I spoke with a friend that have a very nice foundation, and I said, listen, just start shipping. I'll send you a mask. Pay me later. Just give the mask. And the masks were about shipped. But then he called me and said, but what about my liability? And I said, what do you mean about liability? He said, well, I don't know the masks. I said, well, you can trust me. I checked them. The masks are fine. He said, well, I'm afraid about my liability. We lost 2 weeks, because then this friend came back to me and say, oh, I'm going to pay for it. Same we see with states and with the government when they're saying, oh, we are not sure, how can we buy? Oh, it might be $1 more or something like this. And those rules of trying to get the best price and the best timing and the best terms, that they just don't apply. And when people are afraid to work against those rules that they've been using for so long, they are slowing us down. And then people have to step in and say, we take the risk, like Navin did in Rhode Island. We take the risk, and we will be the bridge until the heavy organization can move. So for me right now, and again, I was in the Secret Service. I like Navin. I'm built for trauma. I was trained for it all my life. When you have a crisis like this, you just need to just do. You don't have the time to think and plan. And worst case scenario, by the way, those masks, we are paying for those masks sometimes $4 or $5. We know those masks supposed to cost 50 cents. We know that. We know a lot of people are making a lot of money right now. Still, it doesn't prevent us from doing it, because we need to make sure that people like Esther is protected. And by the way, we are not the heroes, not at all. She's the hero. She needs to face the people. We are just the people that's supposed to help those heroes to really stay alive, and that's our job. And we need to take every risk possible, versus if it's financial or reputation or anything like this, in order to make it happen.
David, do you want to jump in on this leadership question and the barriers you're seeing?
Yeah, I fully agree. My job has always been to support the frontline workers. And in the past, that's been humanitarian workers working in war zones. And now we have our own doctors and nurses. They are now the front lines. They are fighting the war. And so I want to do anything in my power to support them and to keep them protected, because we need them to stay healthy, because all of us can be at risk and could be the ones needing their services. And so, in my view, you completely disrespect your current job title, and you figure out what resources and what skill set you have that can help today. What can you do? Because we all have many different things. I almost forgot about my other job, and every 24 hours we seem to repurpose the skills that we have and figure out how we can further help. So I drive around the state dropping things off. My warehouse, and even the food that we make is being modified today. We decided this morning that we're going to have a completely new line of food, because we need to feed people too. The food supply is second behind healthcare. We need to make sure that we're able to feed this country as well.
Right.
So just think about what you can do now that's completely different than who you were 2 weeks ago.
Great. I see a whole bunch of really wonderful questions coming in from our audience, and thank you all for being with us. These are great questions, and there's a lot of them, so I want to get to them. I just want to make sure we touch on this point. What are your thoughts about what either federal or state government is doing right now? And then what's in the future? What's down the horizon that we're going to be seeing? Esther, first to you.
Yeah, I think that governors are really showing up right now. So, there was a news story just yesterday, the day before, that Oregon is shipping ventilators to New York City because we've kind of assessed our need and realized that our projections mean that we can spare ventilators now. And so I think we're going to start seeing more of this, and I hope it happens with PPE as well, where you just kind of take stock of what's happening. And you just pay it forward and get it to the states that need it, knowing that we may have weeks before we need to pull back and change direction. So I think that's the way this is going to happen in absence of any major federal coordinated action. I might be wrong. Maybe there's a big, centralized resource that is going to come up nationally, but so far it's really been individual states acting autonomously and deciding how they're going to manage this problem within their own state, but also looking around and trying to be a good citizen of this larger community.
Okay. What do you see ahead, Esther? What's on the horizon?
For PPE specifically, or for this whole pandemic?
For this whole pandemic.
So we are going to, what we're talking about with PPE, we are going to talk about with every single resource that we need further downstream. So PPE, as you imagine, is the most obvious thing. Patients are starting to come to us. We need that safety barrier. We're all just like surging ahead with the adrenaline to get that in place. Then, as we are seeing in New York, we're going to see sicker and sicker patients, and we're going to be looking for space, for ventilators, for medicines that are already running out, vital medicines. We need to take care of the sickest of the sick. Medicines are also the same exact thing as PPE, a very complicated and tenuous supply chain that is hard to ratchet up quickly. We need to apply the same innovative strategies, many of the same innovative strategies to medicines as we are for PPE. And then every piece of durable equipment you can imagine in between. I mean, if we need medicines, we also need medication pumps. And then, of course, we need our entire workforce needs to be bolstered, and we need to be really creative about how we infuse the system with more healthcare workers, as many of them fall ill or simply get burnt out in this in fighting this pandemic. So this is one of many, many, many types of resources that we need to innovate around.
No, absolutely. Let's turn to all of those. I want to turn to some of your questions, and a number of people are asking, how can we best obtain these masks, and also what can they do to help? So let me just first start with you, Ami. What would you advise people about how they can get masks and how they can help?
Well, depends who you are. It should be a priority for masks. Those masks should go to the people that need it the most. Let's start from that. There is a fight for demand in China and in other countries. I think the main thing that stops us right now is money. So we know if we have more, and this is like cash in China, if we have more money disposable right now in China, we can secure more masks and ship it. So this is the first. So this is on the front part. Then when the mask gets to the US, then it's really to put them in the hands of the right people, and that's a totally different level. But the barriers that I personally see, I see that it takes a lot of time for this money to get to the factories in China. And by losing this time, we're going in queue behind a lot of other people. And sometimes it's right. By the way, I want to be in the queue behind the city of New York. I think if they're procuring, it's actually very good. And that's one thing. A second example that you can see that it's also a bottleneck is the transportation, because all the commercial flights are gone. All the cargo flights are booked. And an example that I saw actually from Israel in the last couple of days, we took all the commercial flights, all the planes, the physical plane, they all flew to China, and they flew back, and on the seats, on the bench, when you normally have people, there were boxes of masks. So this is something, again, that it can be in the federal level, but it can be also Delta or whatever airline just sending those planes to China and flying them back as soon as they're full. So there's a lot of things that people can do and companies can do and foundations can do. But again, they need to take the risk. They need to say, okay, fly, and we'll get the stuff for you.
That's awesome. Let me take some questions. I have a question from someone named Jean. Says, I understand the dire need for masks. My concern is that by importing masks from China, a country that is not transparent, we may very likely be endangering the safety and well-being of our healthcare workers. Please advise. So quality of masks. Anyone can help with that question?
May I?
Please.
So, as soon as the crisis started, the FDA issued an emergency approval for pretty much everything that comes from China. Then a lot of very bad products came in the market. The FDA reversed it and said, we want just a certain type of mask. All the supply ends. Then 2 days later, it reversed it again. I would say, yes, you can source high quality masks. Those 200 factories that came from the middle of nowhere, their masks are pretty good. They comply with Chinese standards. Are they the best? No. But I would say, even if it's not the best product, it's better than nothing, and it's better than a surgical mask. Mm-hmm. And then bring it on, and then decide. Maybe if you are in a Corona department, of course, you want to use the 3M or Honeywell or whatever. But if you are in the ER and you're using a brand that was sourced in China and approved in China and didn't go through every process in the US, it's still better than nothing. And this is, by the way, exactly what China did, because in China, they didn't have time to verify that all those factories are fine, but they still procure it.
Okay.
So you need to take a risk. That's why I'm saying, again, you cannot say we don't take risk. We just want to take only the top quality. If you want top quality, it means people will not have masks.
Esther, I see you nodding your head. Can you jump in on this, Esther, as a doctor?
Yeah, I mean, that's, again, this is a little bit, I would say everybody's handling this a little bit differently, but I think that the main point is what Ami said. Something is better than nothing. And what we are facing is nothing or completely inappropriate use of masks, like reusing the same mask 7 days in a row. I think at some point in those 7 days, you would rather have a fresh mask that maybe is not that same exact brand or quality. And I think honestly, if you took any of these masks and you did your particulate testing, you know, so we have these fit tests that make sure that there's no fine particles getting behind these N95 masks, for example. It's like you can take a batch of masks and do some quick fit testing on a random sample and see how it performs compared to those masks. And what people are doing is even taking homemade masks. I know this is a question. Homemade masks, of course, you would not expect to stand up to factory masks, but actually I have a friend in town who's making these double layer homemade masks. And they're about, when we do the actual fit testing, they perform about 50% as well. Again, do I want 50% as well? In a perfect universe, no, but we're talking about situations where there is literally zero PPE in an entire ward in some hospitals out there. So I think
Right.
we are, that's where we are with this in the cities that have
Thank
hit
you.
surge. That's where we are.
Thank you. So I have a question here. I think it's from Tara. She says, hi, I'm a physician assistant at an emergency department in the suburbs of Washington, D.C. We are desperately seeking PPE as we anticipate our COVID-19 surge in the coming weeks. We're looking for PPE available for purchase. How can I connect with Navin? So Navin, this is a person from Fairfax, Virginia. How can this physician assistant connect with you?
Yeah, I already gave her my email address. So
Oh, great. Okay, guys, on the chat, you're getting some answers already. Someone asked something that says about the UV radiation of masks, if that works. Can someone answer that question?
Yeah, I think what people are considering in terms of decontamination is UV radiation and heat. And I don't have the numbers off the top of my head, but there was recently a paper published with a chart sort of talking about at different levels of dry heat versus different UV radiation protocols, what level of decontamination they're achieving without degrading the materials. Because obviously you can just turn up the heat and kill the virus, but also completely break down the mask. So I don't have it at my fingertips, and I think all of this is pretty new data because we haven't really been in situations here before where we've needed to do things like decontaminate between shifts, but the data is emerging. So I would just say, look to the literature and certainly I think we'll probably get pretty good standardized protocols within the upcoming weeks.
Okay. Francisco Rodriguez says, are you aware of any efforts to procure PPE for low and middle income countries and how export bans are affecting them?
Let me answer it. Most countries don't allow export right now. So we checked in India and in Jordan, etc. They want to have their mask for themselves. So it becomes harder. And we are also trying, Navin and I, we're trying to advise countries in Africa like Ghana how to prepare when they don't have budget. How do you prepare when you don't have the ability? So the ability to self-made the face shields and the ability to self-made mask, which like Sarah said, is like Esther said, is better than having nothing. So it's becoming harder and harder to buy PPEs globally because it's a global race. It's not a local race that one country wants to buy and one country wants to sell. China is the only one that right now, because of what they did, they have overcapacity of production, and that's opportunity. That's opportunity for us to use.
That's great. Manon Machet says, so is there a price tag? Is the market going to dictate what and who is valuable?
Navin have a good answer for this.
Navin.
what's my answer? I mean,
You know, that you're saying that it needs to be like, you know, the AIDS drugs, like, you know, that needs to be like a centralized effort.
Yeah, I mean, I was thinking back to when President Clinton was procuring ARVs for HIV patients many years ago. And not only was it just, it wasn't even a country getting together, it was 66 countries getting together to approach a situation and drive the cost down so that we were all on the same team, so that we could get good pricing to be able to make sure that patients, no matter where in the world they lived, would be able to have access to ARVs. This is a similar problem. We are going to take the worldwide supply is going to come to the United States. You know, my normal areas of working are in Africa and India and places like that. And I lose sleep every single night about what's going to happen in those countries. There's no way, while we're able to triple our budgets and be able to pay up for masks because we have to, you know, there's no way that the low income, middle income countries can compete with the United States. It's not fair. It is completely inequitable. And that's frankly how the world has been run for a very long time. And, you know, so what can we do about that? You know, we're so consumed with the US, and the crisis really is centered here. And so I think we do have to stay here on this. But like we're moving things around in the US, like it's really actually a beautiful thing to see China and Ami's employees work for us to come to our rescue, you know, because their capacity has been used up. They've been through this. How can they share? The same as Cuomo in New York says, help me and then I'll help you. Like I just hope that we can remember what this feels like so that when our crisis has passed, we don't forget about who's next, and that we can find a way to get our resources to the next place that's a hot spot, even if it's not in our own country. It's our duty to do that.
Mhm. That's great. Great answer. Someone has just written in saying, during this discussion, I'm starting to feel a little more optimistic, which is great. But what then are the opportunities for low hanging fruit? So I think this person is kind of asking, what are some of the near-term wins, and what can our viewers do to keep this optimism that you three have brought us? Esther, you want to?
Yeah, I mean, there are so many ways to help in this effort and to double down on our early wins. I mean, the first thing is to not lose energy. This is different than most disasters we have to deal with. I mean, sometimes there is a discrete event and we all rally around. We're like an earthquake, a hurricane, it happens to a region. It's a single time event, even though the recovery stretches out for a while. We're not used to something like this that is going to impact all 50 states hard over a sustained period of time. And right now, I can't even tell you what that timeline is at all. That's different. And that, I think, will come with sort of ups and downs in morale. So all these things that people are doing, I mean, the donations, the grassroots work, the raising awareness is helpful. I think what people can do is, I mean, obviously understand that it is not all your fight all the time. You come to it when you have energy, you take a break and hand it off to other people when you can. But also know that a little bit of national advocacy is good, and then a lot of work in your neighborhood. So even though I'm helping with this big national effort, the thing I always tell people when they reach out to me individually is ask your local hospital or health system what they need most, and work with your neighbors and friends close to home to build up an effort to support them. That amplifies what we do across thousands of cities and actually makes it much better. So look to your local efforts. There is something that you can do for your hospital. And I also want to encourage, this is another question, I do want to encourage individual face mask wearing. This is not to detract from the hospital PPE effort, but everything that curbs disease helps the PPE effort, because we will see fewer sick people. So face masks, even if they have just a teeny tiny bit of efficacy in preventing transmission of disease, particularly among asymptomatic carriers, that will help this same effort as well.
A couple of people have asked about that question, Esther. The masks that people are being encouraged to wear now that they're making at home versus the N95 masks. Can the three of you comment on the difference between those two, and to what extent homemade masks are or are not useful for healthcare workers, and should people be wearing masks? You've said yes, Esther. David and Ami, you want to jump in?
Yeah.
So go ahead, Nave.
We're using all, well, let's see. At home, we're using the cloth ones. My neighbor has been making these, but there's also rules around these. Like I've put my initials on the inside. I want to make sure that I have the same side on my mouth each time. I also want to make sure I wash it every single day on high heat and high temperature settings, so it's washed and dried. So you want to make sure that you keep that clean. If someone sneezes on you and then you flip it, the last thing you want to do is then put that in direct contact. So always make sure you're wearing it on the same side. No one in normal world should be wearing an N95. That's strictly for hospital use. We cannot take a single mask from those people. And then there's things in between. So if you're working in food supply or something like that, something lesser like a surgical mask is something that can help keep the food supply chain people healthy. So we just want to make sure that we all are a different part of the community, and we have to wear the right thing and use it in the right way in order for there to be the supplies are deployed in the most efficient, effective way possible.
If I may add that the technical explanation, just to be clear, the homemade mask is protecting me from having other people sick. So I'm containing, if I'm now sneezing or coughing, it stays within me. So if the entire society is protecting themselves, I'm actually protecting others by having the masks. So that's the most important thing. The N95, it's built for the health workers, because if they are exposed to somebody, it actually protects the medical teams. Therefore, you don't really need it. And as Levin say, you really need to know what you need. And by the way, you also need to be a role model. For the last month, I've been wearing a mask in my house next to my kids in order to tell them, that it's important. I was on national television in Israel multiple times with a mask, because people need to understand. Initially, people said, oh, if you go with a mask, people will think that you're sick. Well, luckily, for us, because I lived in China, it's very normal. If you're sick, you immediately put a mask on in order not to contain other people. And that's what we need to do. Every person in the world right now needs to have a mask on to protect society, not to protect themselves. And the only people that really need to protect themselves is the MDs, is the nurses, is the people that are in critical places that we need to keep. So this is kind of the balance why everything is viable, everything is needed, and we can do it alone.
Ami used to be the one who looks ridiculous all the time, but now we all look ridiculous.
Now we all look ridiculous. I want to end with a closing question that a couple of people have asked about. What are lessons from this? And Carl Manlon says, when it ends, what are the key lessons to be taught to us all? But before I get to that point, I just want us to do a reality check of the production in the US. Navin, when we spoke, I know that people have said that we're ramping up production and Honeywell is producing in Rhode Island, but I think you said that's going to take longer than we imagine, and that you've got to check it out there. Tell us the state of play today as you know it, Navin.
Yeah, I mean, I think Esther made a good point. Like, ask your hospitals, ask the people that you know what they need, because you will be shocked at their answer, because it appears like we have everything sorted out. President Trump spoke about a factory in Rhode Island that is going to be producing masks. I investigated it, and it turns out that this factory has been gutted. There's not even walls yet, and so this is what has caused the need for all of us, everyone who's listening, to make a phone call within their community and ask what's really going on. Because I have done that, and I've gotten answers that are really were quite shocking to me. And I called a hospital in Rhode Island, and I I said, what do you need? And he said, we're in need of a lot of masks. And I said, I just deployed all of mine. I have 100 left in my office. He goes, I will drive down and take them. And I thought, wow, this is a pretty large hospital, and they're willing to drive to my factory to pick up 100. So make sure that you are going out and asking these questions to the people that you know, so that you can help save the day for your healthcare workers, your doctors and your nurses in whatever way, because you might be surprised at the answers that you get.
And how you can be helpful. Exactly. Yeah, that's one thing I've really learned from you all. Ami, let me ask you, what is the biggest lesson that you've taken away from this? And when this is all over, what are key lessons?
So, I've been warning about this, and I have it in writing for more than a month. And sadly, it's very hard for people to listen and to get prepared for something that they are unaware of. But to be honest with you, I don't think it's right now. It's the time to draw any lessons. We will deal with that in a couple of months. Now we need to act fast. Whatever your capacity, if you have money, donate it. If you have a factory, convert it and start making things that people need. If you are in your local community, go and start babysitting services for the people that work in the hospitals. Make food for them and give them massage in the evening. I don't care. Like, I don't do that because that's actually not good. But there is so many things. Like in Israel, I have an army of volunteers that just driving masks to hospitals. You have a driver license, use it. You know how to sew, use it. Don't think about, oh, what is the responsibility of the federal government, of the state? That's not important right now. We'll deal with that later. Right now, act. Don't sit. Don't say, oh, this is too much money, this is less. It's not valid right now. And in a couple of weeks, in a couple of months, things will relax. Then we will be able to draw the conclusions. I think it's just we don't have time for it.
Okay, thank you, Ami. Esther, as our frontline heroine, I want to give you the last word. What are some lessons that you've taken from this?
First of all, I just have to say, reading through some of these comments of people who want to do things and listening to you, Ami and Nevin, I find it incredibly moving. I think it's also, I'm post overnights, but to know that there is this wall behind us, that you guys are there for us, and putting everything into it while we're out there just makes us feel so much less alone. And I know it's there, but to hear it played out like this and how hard you've been working is just amazing. So, that's a good lesson to me, that we're not alone out there. And then I think when this is all over, we have to go through our entire system and ask, are we building a place where we can scale up every resource in case we need, twofold or tenfold or 100-fold? It doesn't mean that we sit in a hospital with 1,000 empty rooms, but it means that we know now that this is possible. And how do we create an entire system where everything we need is scalable, so that we don't need to be scrambling like this anymore? So those are the two things for me.
Thank you, Esther.
Thank you all, really.
So, Ami, Nathan, Esther, you're all our heroes. Thank you so much for being with us today. And on behalf of the whole Aspen Institute community, we're grateful for who you are and how you show up every day as leaders. For all the viewers and listeners, thank you so much. You can go to aspenglobalinnovators.org, Aspen Health for All, to get the websites of how you can be involved and help. And we look forward to sharing this journey with you. Thank you so much, everyone. Bye-bye.